Minos has finally defeated the Steam Knight.
I'm gonna try it again once Arado gets her module in a few updates, but for now, this is just left in the dust. The first thing I did was go back to 1120. Yeah, no, the stage still sucks. Arado, even though she takes out more of the small tanks, the boss is still unmanageable.
If you're wondering what has changed since Arado got her mod, nothing. Nothing's changed. I just took a really long break and here we are. In all honesty, I am pretty bad at studying stages. To me, finishing them really comes down to doing whatever, hoping it works, and if it doesn't, take a step back, change something, and hope that butterflies into the end. I honestly was very far off the mark the first time I did this stage. I only cleared it now because that really long break made me forget everything I tried to do and started from scratch doing something entirely different. There are some tips and tricks I remember, such as you might have just seen, putting down Conviction to bait out the tanks so Arado can get out early, but the strat is going to revert to understanding the core ideals of Minos, which really comes down to just face tanking. I put downside Roka to bait some tank shots, not because Arado would die from the tank, she'd just sleep the tank and then destroy it, but I really need Arado to keep Vigor because I need to rotate her earlier. I'm using Palace X, and this means her threshold for Vigor is 50% instead of 80%, which is where this idea comes from. Afterwards, I set up Vulcan early. Vulcan takes a barrage, but it's fine because Vulcan has the highest defense in the team, being a juggernaut. Mudrock and Penance overshadow Vulcan a lot, but when you're restricted to just Vulcan, she can actually do a lot if you depend on her. There's a strange kind of insurance when you have Vulcan. As long as she has her skill ready or is already active, she can't die unless whatever she's fighting is extremely lethal or just ignores her defense by, doing arts or something like that. Right here's a good example. I put down Conviction to help Vulcan finish off the tank. However, Conviction's in range of the other tank and therefore takes a barrage. Because this tank always hits whoever's at the highest percentage HP, since Vulcan is constantly regenerating, Vulcan takes a lot of the shots off Conviction, and therefore lets both of them survive. There's actually two parts to this. First was to deal with the tank that they were working on. The second reason was to let Arado be deployed early. Conviction still being alive at the very last moment, baited out all the drones on the top, letting Arado come out safely and deal with the carts as soon as possible while also dealing a tiny bit of chip to the boss. I forget how many carts Arado was able to take before, but now with the safer landing and her module, she can take out 6 before they start moving. As nice as it'd be to have Arado dealing with the boss immediately, remember, these carts deal extra damage to melee units, and Minos is mostly melee, so they are actually top priority. You might think Palace in the back early was a bit strange, but like everything else, there's 2 reasons for this. That tile was chosen because it lets Palace deal with the 2 carts that Arado can't reach from her current tile. The timing though was because everyone needs to have Vigor. Because it's a percentage buff, Arado and Conviction, who naturally have high numbers on their skill 1s, just do so much more, helping them deal damage to their respective targets. Meanwhile, Vulcan is constantly regenerating and therefore always has it. This lets Vulcan not only stall the boss as intended, but also deal quite a bit of damage herself. I should note that Conviction needs to land a crit, but because I had Vulcan stalling, Conviction had plenty of time to land plenty of punches, and one of them was bound to crit. That's kinda how you have to deal with Conviction RNG, just give yourself enough time to deal as many punches as possible, and Conviction will eventually land it. I pull back Vulcan first so the barrage targets Conviction, and therefore leaves Arado alone to finish dealing with the carts. Afterwards, I pull back Conviction because, let's be real, Conviction is not surviving that anyways. Conviction really just needs to make sure that it doesn't hit Arado or Palace. Moving on. Palace's third skill is very conveniently long enough in duration to deal with both carts before running out. And the multi-hit makes sure that Palace doesn't attack the boss on accident because Palace will just attack both the boss and the cart. With just the boss left, there's really only 2 things I need to watch out for. One is the barrages, which happen at set HP intervals. These are a problem because I need to spend so many resources surviving them that it's really hard to deal damage afterwards, letting the boss get away if I'm not careful. The specific timing is always wonky because Conviction crits are a factor, but in this case, Conviction lands a very lucky crit right before Palace dies. The smart thing once the boss takes off on the next transition is to pull everyone back,
But I leave conviction behind because I don't actually know the timing on the barrage, so having conviction there will just let me know when it actually starts and when it's safe to put down Vulcan. This is important because Vulcan needs to have skill up as soon as possible to deal with the second thing I'm worried about. Every few attacks, the Steam Knight will throw a really strong 3-hit attack that no one on the team can survive except Vulcan. Even then, Vulcan needs to either land dodges while skill is on, or be at basically max HP, so I just pivoted around the latter and used Vulcan skill as soon as possible to keep Vulcan at max HP whenever I can. Using skill 1 on Vulcan also lets Vulcan live it, but using skill 2 means I can also deal as much damage as possible to the boss, letting Vulcan solo trigger the next phase. Conviction and Arado are there to deal damage, while Sadroka is there for later. I can just have her sitting there, charging skill and lasting through the barrage while skill is on, and also having Palace behind the Steam Knight to deal damage. Sideroka herself can't last that long against the Steam Knight, especially after wasting skill on the barrage, but she does better than Palace, so that just gives a tiny bit more damage. Something I didn't realize while doing this was the boss actually has a third phase, or a third barrage to be more specific. The first one's at roughly 66%, the second one's at roughly 33%, and the last one is somewhere at 10% or lower. What do you mean the boss has one? What do you mean the boss has a third one? How? What? It was like, okay, 66%, 33%, who would have guessed the boss had another one at 10%? I probably knew that, I just completely forgot. Instinctually, I almost put down Conviction, but that would have been a big blunder because Conviction's self-stun was too long to make it up in time to stop the boss. Thankfully though, retreating Palace gave just enough DP to get Vulcan, who just came back, early enough to use skill to finish off the boss to finally end this once and for all.
Mission accomplished. 喜ばしい勝利ですわ。外貨を歌い上げましょう。ドクター、先ほどの私の勇姿をご覧いただけまして。
GG! Let's Oh my fucking god!